really want to give my thanks to Sophie and the Alumni Association for organizing tonight, especially because this is a reschedule. I think it was May I was supposed to talk and I ended up having COVID. So I'm glad that I didn't talk to folks then, but very glad to be able to come today. So today I'm going to talk about graduate school, and I think that I perhaps am one of the most qualified people on CSU's campus to talk about that because I'm the Vice Provost for Graduate Affairs and Dean of the Graduate School here at CSU. And I'm also a faculty member in the Department of Biology with a joint appointment in math, and I've been here for over 22 years, since 2003. And I love graduate education and graduate students. It's something that I find really inspiring. Graduate students contribute a lot to the mission of CSU, undergraduate access and student success, and our research innovation. Graduate students are fundamentally involved in all of that. And for me, interacting with graduate students is a joy because they know so much and are always at the cutting edge of their fields. So I really learn a lot whenever I interact with graduate students, and it feels good to help guide graduate students who will be our leaders, especially our leaders in technical fields and technical areas. So I love being the Dean of the Graduate School, and I'm feeling really grateful to be here tonight. So I'm going to talk first about graduate school generally, what it is, how it works, and then we'll talk about CSU's graduate school in specific. So I think the first question that we want to ask ourselves if we're thinking about graduate school is if it's a good fit for us. What are some of the things that you can get out of graduate school? Do you want to lead or innovate in fields that interest you? Do you want to take your creative pursuits to the next level? To do research, really cutting edge research, to teach and mentor others, which I love doing, to stand out in a competitive field, to have those advanced credentials that give you that leadership opportunity. Is business for a better world in your future? So if any of these resonate with you, then yes, graduate school may be for you. One of the great things about graduate school is that it gives a highly personalized education. And there are a lot of different types of programs and entry points into graduate education and a lot of flexibility about how you approach it. So there are master's degrees. There are thesis-based, non-thesis-based, professional master's degrees. We'll talk about each of these a little bit more in a minute. There's the doctoral degrees, which can be research-based or more applied. There are graduate certificates, which can give you a head start or let you dip a toe in the water without fully committing if you want to see what graduate education is about. And perhaps not as relevant for this group, but maybe, we also have a lot of accelerated options that allow undergraduates to double count advanced coursework towards their undergraduate degree and their graduate degree. And there's some sort of more traditional ways to do this through accelerated master's programs, but we have some new pathways that we're opening up to help our undergraduates transition into graduate school. And I think that's important if you're considering maybe a second bachelor's in another field, being able to accelerate and add on a graduate degree in that field, or if you've got friends or family who might be interested in those options. And then we have grad students who are full-time doing this, who are part-time. We have students that are resident here on campus, that are online, that are hybrid. There's lots of different options to make graduate education work for you and your particular situation. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the types of degrees that there are very generally. So there is the traditional doctoral degree. They tend to take 4 to 6 years to complete. They often include some level of financial support through graduate assistantships or fellowships, and I'll talk about financial support for graduate education more in a bit. They often involve about 2 years of coursework and about 2 years of research, but sort of depends. That's how you get from 4 years to 6 years, depending on how you spend your time with coursework and research. There are professional doctorates, like our doctorate of occupational therapy. These can require residencies or internships or other kinds of experiences. Most of our standard doctoral degrees, the doctorate of philosophy, have a preliminary exam that thinks about sort of your overall knowledge in the field, and then a dissertation, which is the culminating experience of the doctorate, and is the way that you take all the research that you've done during that time and present it. Next are master's degrees. These generally take about 1 to 3 years to complete, and they often, but not always, are student funded. So students themselves pay the tuition and fees associated with the degree, but not always. There are also assistantships and fellowships associated with these. They can be more coursework focused, and some types are only coursework. Master's degrees are a little bit tricky because, at least at CSU and across many universities, there are 3 different types of master's degrees that are offered. The first is what we may traditionally think of as a master's degree, which requires a thesis, which is a little bit like a mini dissertation, very similar, but on a shorter time frame. And so that's what you would be doing with a Master of Science or Master of Arts. We also have some of those same master's degrees that have a project. So they're research-based, they have a project and some kind of product associated with that, but the product isn't as intensive or as large usually as the thesis is. And then finally, we have coursework-only master's degrees. Some have an internship, some do not. These tend to be more professional or very applied degrees with a smaller research component than the first 2 that I talked about. So all good options and different kinds of experiences. And then last, I want to talk about graduate certificates. So these are usually a smaller number of credits made up of a set of 3 to 5 classes that go together in a topical area. You need to apply for these, but the only requirement is having a bachelor's degree. The courses from the certificate can then be transferred into a graduate degree, and you can actually stack up these different certificates towards a graduate degree like a master's degree. Financial aid is available for certificates, but it's generally more limited than it is for the full degree programs. And they can be useful to give you an additional credential for your professional advancement. I think they're really great because if you aren't sure if graduate school is for you, but you want to try it in a really meaningful way, this is a way that you can try out graduate school and get something back for it without having to fully commit. And if you decide not to apply now for a graduate degree, you can apply later because you already have this graduate certificate credential. And for some people, it's actually more common, I think, than most folks realize, but applying to graduate school can be a process. It's not uncommon not to get into graduate school on the first try, or not to get into particular graduate schools that you might think you want to go to. There's a lot of things at play. Some are just the basic credentials, like the GPA and things like that, but other is, the level of fit that you have with the program and openings and availability in the program. We'll talk about some of those things more later. But having a graduate certificate can help improve your chances of getting into a full graduate degree, because if you're successful at that, then it shows that you can be successful at the graduate degree as well. So it helps you to showcase your success at the graduate level. So when we talk about graduate school, we have to pick a program and we need to apply. So there's 2 sort of sides to that coin, right? I mean, the first is, what is the program looking for in you? And the other is, what are you looking for in a program? So let's start with that. When you are considering choosing a graduate program, I mean, we have hundreds here at CSU, and when you look nationwide, there's thousands. So how do you narrow that down and make a good choice, a good fit for you, and find a place where you will have community and feel successful? So I think the first piece to think about really is the program itself, the program of interest. What is the reputation of that program and the faculty that are there? Going to a very strong program with a good reputation can open many doors for folks. And this is also sort of a way, if you're interested in a doctorate, for example, to build towards those really high reputation programs by getting a master's degree first, and showing, similar to a certificate, that you can be successful in graduate school. So you can have some strategies that can increase your ability to get into very high reputation programs. You also want to think about what's the content and the rigor of the program. What do graduates of that program have to say? How satisfied were they with the program? What kinds of careers are they going into? Are they the types of careers that you're interested in? And what's the cost and financial support in place for these programs? What will be the return on investment to you for what you put into the program, both financially and in terms of your time and effort? So thinking about that particular program of interest is one thing to consider. Another is the overall institutional culture and support. So how much does that university support graduate education? What are the opportunities for financial aid, fellowships, scholarships, assistantships? What are the opportunities for graduate student professional development and mentoring? I'm going to talk about that a little bit more later. But when you come away with a graduate degree, you want to come away with the content knowledge associated with the field that you're specializing in, but you also want to come away with other kinds of skills outside of just the particular program area that can help you demonstrate your ability for leadership, for example, or organization or program management, all of those other kinds of skills that you learn alongside the topical content of the area that you're getting a degree in. You want to make sure that there's a strong commitment to access for all learners, and also that the institution's culture and support align with your own personal values, and it's a good fit for you. For example, there are some universities and programs like CSU with our land grant mission who really prioritize and value outreach, community service, community-based research. So if those are the kinds of things that you're interested in, then you want to be choosing a university that supports that kind of culture. And then there's other factors to think about that are really important for how comfortable you're going to feel at the university and on campus, like the size of the institution. Some people are overwhelmed by an institution of 60,000 people and are more comfortable at a smaller institution. Some folks are bored at a small institution and really want the excitement and the huge array of different types of activities that come with a really large institution. A public institution versus a private institution, the geographic location. Is it in a big city, a small city? Is it on the West Coast or the East Coast? Is it close to your family or maybe far from your family, depending on what it is that you're looking for? So these are sort of the main three areas that you really want to be thinking about when you're looking at which graduate programs could be a good fit for you, both your academic interests, your career goals, as well as for you personally, because you need to be comfortable in order to be successful in that graduate program. And then we can talk about the other side of the coin, which is what is it that programs are looking for in you? So again, sort of 3 areas to think about. The first is academic and scholarly preparation. So what kind of coursework have you done? Have you done the coursework that's going to prepare you for that particular kind of degree? What is your GPA? Many universities have a 3.0 or B average requirement for graduate degrees, for entry into those graduate degrees, but there's some flexibility around that as well. Sometimes standardized test scores, these used to be very, very important in graduate education and are less so now. So fewer and fewer programs are requiring those, but there are still some that do. And then what is your research or scholarly experience or your creative activities that you've been involved in that are relevant to the area of study? All of these pieces help show that you're ready for graduate school and you can be successful there. Then the next piece is what is your alignment with the research interests of the program that you're applying to. So based on the faculty that are within a program, there's often different kinds of specializations at different kinds of universities. And so you want to understand what the expertise of the faculty are within the program that you're applying to, and if it's a good match with what your interests are within that particular area, more specific kinds of interests. And then finally, what is the alignment between you and the program with broader programmatic mission and values that we see in that program, like community-based research or extension and outreach or teaching? If these are really important components of the program, are they important for you as well? So that's a little bit about what you might want to look for and what programs might want to look for. Programs are also looking not just at your preparation and your match. More and more, they're also looking for evidence of what your personal traits are that can lead you to success. And they gain information for this from your application materials, like your personal statement and your letters of reference. So examples of traits that are viewed as generally helpful for succeeding in graduate school would be, for example, self-efficacy, which is your belief in your capacity to engage in the behaviors that are needed to produce specific performances. Basically, can you figure out how to get where you need to be? Can you do the research yourself to figure out how to apply a particular research method, for example? How independent can you be in guiding your own pathway? Grit and resiliency are also important kinds of traits. Grad school is an intense experience, and so programs want to make sure that you're going to be able to get through it. And how passionate are you about the topic? Often graduate programs are selective and there are a limited number of spaces. And so understandably, programs want to bring on students who are going to be really excited and ready to engage in the work that needs to be done. And then different programs operate in different ways. There's some kind of funny details sometimes, and it's important to be aware of those because you need to speak to them or understand them in the way you go about applying. Some programs you have to have an individual faculty member identified who will be your mentor and advisor, and you need that before you can be accepted. Some are the opposite. There's a cohort requirement, so they accept a certain number of students, sometimes with particular types of interests, and they want to have an overall balanced cohort. So that's sort of the opposite. Some programs are looking for students who can self-pay. Others have research or teaching slots that they need to fill, and they want to make sure that they have students who are capable in doing those kinds of activities as well. Sometimes they're research-based, sometimes they're more hands-on, experientially based, so lots of different kinds of programs. And then I think a really important question to think about when you're considering graduate school is, understanding how it differs from the undergraduate experience, because it is a different kind of experience. Your peers are all really smart too. And they're also really highly motivated. So doing group work is awesome because you're always in an awesome group, right? Everybody pulls their weight in graduate school. Most of the work is within your passion area. There's no kinds of core requirements that are outside of that passion area that you have to get through. If you're an English person, you don't have to take math, and if you're a math person, you probably don't have to take English, right? So it's great. And I know for me personally, I did way better in graduate school than I did in my undergrad because it was all in my passion area, and I was excited about every single class I took. The classes often focus more on reading, on projects, on collaborative, engaged activities than they do on exams, rote memorization, things like that. The graduate educational experience is more about developing critical thinking and communicating the groundbreaking, innovative work that you're doing than they are on, remembering definitions and those kinds of things. Research is often very important, sometimes less so in some of the professional masters or doctorates that are more experiential based, but often there's still a research component in those. And many of the other degrees are very, very research focused. So more focus on research or advanced experiences and less on classroom. There's new expectations and different structures. The kinds of requirements for graduate education are different than undergrad. It's really important to proactively plan with faculty and staff in order to complete the degree. And strong relationships with advisors and mentors are really critical. And the support structures, because of that, differ from undergraduate programs. You often have a very strong relationship with a couple of faculty members who have a lot of expertise in your particular area. And the great thing that is that is the mechanism by which graduate education can be highly personalized, and you really get to work on that really small niche that excites you and makes you unique, because not everybody has that skill set. So graduate school is a different environment from undergraduate studies, and you really get to engage and learn alongside your peers. Okay, so that's sort of generally what graduate school is about pretty quickly. And now I want to talk generally about what the application process is like. So here's sort of some general steps. You can never start too early building your resume or your CV, engaging in activities that are relevant to what you want to do to that degree, and will help the application committee who's reviewing all of the applicants understand how qualified you are, what kind of fit you are, what uniquenesses and strengths you bring to the program. You want to maintain as high a GPA as possible if you're still taking classes, and if not, you might want to consider taking some additional coursework that would prepare you, or one of these graduate certificates that would help provide evidence of preparation alongside more content information. I think it's great to engage in some informational interviews, and we're going to have a little opportunity for that with our panel later. Talk to graduate students in your field of interest, to professors, to professionals. How did a graduate degree make a difference for them? Narrow down your programs of interest and the degree type based on some of those criteria that we talked about earlier. Find the schools with your program of interest and understand the application deadline and the materials for that. And then as you get closer to applying, think about programs that offer some assistance with admission. When you're looking at graduate programs, you also want to look at the faculty that are associated with that, the institutions, the communities, right? All of those things that are going to be important to you. And as I said, start to dive into the details of what it takes to actually apply. Study for and prep for any kind of entrance exams that there might be, GREs if those are still required, and sign up for some visits in person or virtually so you can see if it's a campus community that you fit into. Having a mentor who understands the graduate education system can still be really important in the application process. Connections do matter. They can help you interpret what a graduate program and a university is known for and the strengths and whether or not it would be a good fit for you. They can provide recommendation letters for you that can be important for you to get in. And they can just help explain the process of application. So it's not a black box. So you really know what you need to do and you can get some feedback. Your application materials and your recommendation letters should directly address the things that programs are looking for. Your academic preparation, your alignment with the research and other broader goals of the program, the personal qualities that you bring. These are the materials that the program has to determine whether or not they will accept your application to the program or not. And the strongest materials provide, in addition to alignment with these sort of general principles of what the program is looking for, very specific details that speak to you and what you have done and your experiences and how they align with those sort of general categories that programs are looking for. If it's not required, always include your resume or CV as supplementary material, and use your personal statement to elaborate or highlight and tie your experiences back to the program's priorities. And ideally, your recommendation letters do that too, so you're telling a coherent and cohesive and consistent story across all of your different application components. Some programs will also ask very specific questions to help guide your statement, but you already know what it is that you need to speak to based on what we talked about that programs are looking for. When you're asking for recommendation letters, the most impactful letters come from long-term professional supervisors. If you're returning to the graduate school after some time in the workforce, those are the people that really know you best, and they can speak to your personal traits and your abilities. And full professors, if you are a more recent graduate, are really important to get recommendation letters from because they can speak to your ability to succeed in the academic setting in your coursework. And full professors have just been around a lot longer than assistant or associate professors, so they have a much larger pool of students that they can compare you to. So when I've been here for 22 years and I say this student is in the top 1% of students that I've worked with, I'm comparing to thousands of students, whereas in my first year, I was comparing to dozens of students probably. So looking for recommendations, letter writers who really know you, have a lot of experience with you, and have a large pool that they can compare you to. So then there's sort of those other considerations that you need to think about in your application. If you're applying to a program where you need to identify a faculty mentor or advisor before application, it takes a while to do that. So you want to consider starting to reach out 6, even 12 months ahead of time. When you reach out, you probably have to do that with an email. We used to say in the old days, a cold call, a cold email, not having an introduction. But that's part of the reason why who you know, who's in your network already and who's helping you with your graduate application can be really helpful because they can make some of those introductions for you. And that's helpful. But when you're reaching out to faculty, be really specific. Not only about what you hope to gain. I get a lot of emails like that. I'd love to come and work in your research group because I know I would get X, Y, and Z. And I'm thinking, yeah, you would get X, Y, and Z, but what am I going to get? So don't forget to address that part. Not only what will you get, but what will you bring? And everybody has something to bring. Sometimes I talk to undergraduates and they feel like, oh, I'm so inexperienced. I don't know what I would bring, but you have something. Every student I've ever worked with has something that they bring unique to the group. And then also show genuine interest, especially in these days of AI writing. It's pretty easy for someone to use AI to write an email to me and says, hey, I really am interested in your area of research, and talk about that. But I think if you really show genuine interest, that comes across. Have you read some of my research papers? Can you speak to them specifically? What in those excited you? So provide some detail like that, so that I know that you're interested in working with me specifically, not that you're sending out 1,000 of these kinds of letters. I mean, maybe you are, and that's okay too. But just like a job application where you need to tweak your resume to make it specific to the particular position you're applying to, same thing here. Make me feel special. Let me know that you really were interested in my research. Show me that. And then I think it's just really important to seek help and mentorship along the way, usually from somebody who knows you well and has gone through this experience to help you prepare your application. But on the other end, the programs that you're applying to, they usually have a program coordinator or somebody who helps with admissions who can help answer all of your sort of detailed questions about that program in particular. Okay, I want to spend a little time talking about funding. There's three main types of funding for graduate education. The first are assistantships, graduate teaching assistantships, research, or administrative support. Teaching assistantships usually involve time teaching in an undergraduate class. The research assistantships usually involve doing research on a topic related to the work of their advisor. It often is related to the thesis or dissertation work, the research project that the student needs to complete as part of their degree, but not always. And the support assistantships often are providing administrative support for an academic department or a unit. In general, these assistantships are about 20 hours a week. They're part-time. So the stipend, the salary that comes with them is minimal, but they usually have tuition and fee benefits, which are quite substantial. Scholarships are gift aid, and they don't have to be repaid. Grants are somewhat similar. They're financial aid that also does not have to be repaid. CSU participates in the Colorado Graduate Grant, which provides financial support to graduate students who are Colorado residents in areas of need for the state of Colorado. And the funding is based on financial need and available resources and participating in one of those eligible majors. But that funding can definitely help with graduate school here in Colorado. There's also often university-specific kinds of opportunities around research, so you can look at websites to get some ideas about that, and then reach out to the programs you're interested in with specific questions. Fellowships and scholarships support graduate students, usually pursuing research primarily in STEM fields, but sometimes also in the humanities. So there's some different kinds of options. I want to talk a little bit more about loans, especially because the loan landscape has changed recently due to changes at the federal level. Loans available to graduate students are different than those available to undergraduates, and overall, loan financing is more restrictive for graduate education. There are both private and federal loans. Historically, there have been Grad Plus loans based on financial need, but those are being phased out over the next couple of years. There are still federal options with direct unsubsidized loans, and there's new caps on those, both annually for the graduate program and lifetime caps that also include your federal debt associated with undergraduate programs. So the federal borrowing options are more constrained than they used to be, but many of our graduate programs do fit within the direct unsubsidized loans. Otherwise, moving forward, private loans will probably be the most common option. For many of these loans, you need to have a good credit record. You need to think about the cost of attendance versus other types of financial aid that you have that determines how much federal loan you can qualify for. And sometimes there are enrollment requirements, like needing to be a full-time student or a certain number of credits. I want to talk just briefly from the graduate education perspective about some of the pros and cons of loans. These are largely for non-professional degrees, because professional degrees tend to have a really strong return on investment. But these are some of the things to think about. So I think from a pros perspective, the loans can simply allow access to the degree and the future earning potential that comes with that. And sometimes they can be used as a supplement to other kinds of funding that you're already receiving, like as an assistantship, for instance, because the stipends or salaries are not always so high, despite the big tuition benefit. So if you have a family, for example, that you're trying to support on that, that can be hard. And financial stress is hard on a person, and it can get in the way of your academic success. So sometimes it's a good option overall. Some of the cons are that you have to balance that debt with the degree value and the ability to repay. And it can only delay the financial stress, right? Because at some point you still have to pay that money. A rough guideline for research-based or non-professional degrees is that you might consider the equivalent of 1 to 2 semesters of loans. That's usually feasible to pay back, but not more than that. Okay, so that's a lot of information about graduate school generally, and now I want to talk about CSU more specifically. CSU is a cool place for graduate education. At CSU, graduate students are part of a thriving academic and professional community. And I think we offer a really outstanding combination of opportunity and mentorship and impact. So first, CSU is proud to be a Carnegie R1 research institution. That's a distinction that places us among the top tier of research universities nationwide. And it means that you have access to leading faculty, robust research opportunities, labs, equipment, and resources that empower our graduate students to really push the boundaries of their fields, which goes back to why I've been really excited about working with graduate students. They're on the cutting edge of their fields. We're proud that we have a graduate enrollment of around 7,000 students. We're about 22% of the university. So there's a lot of graduate students around here across all of our programs over the full academic year. So this number really reflects the strength of our graduate community. So large enough that we've got a lot of different kinds of opportunities, but also personal enough that we can foster meaningful connections, mentorship, belonging, community. Our students come to CSU in a lot of different ways. 50% are enrolled in resident instruction programs, pursuing their degrees in person right here on campus. And about the other half, the other 50% are enrolled online. And that brings flexibility and access to students all over the country in all kinds of different ways. So whether you're here in person or connecting virtually, you're part of a community, a graduate community that's focused on academic excellence and professional growth and lasting grad RAM pride. So at CSU, I talked about before, but there's just a huge flexibility in the number of options there are in our graduate programs. We have 179 different master's degrees, 69 doctoral programs, and over 89 graduate certificates, as well as 7 different interdisciplinary graduate programs. And graduate certificates are the fastest growing option here on campus. So no matter what your path is, no matter what your needs are, there's a program here that's designed to help you grow and specialize and develop those leadership opportunities. So I invite you to explore these options on our graduate programs webpage. CSU also provides really strong outcomes for our graduate students. 92% of our grad students rated their entire educational experience at CSU as good to excellent. 97% had first destination plans after graduation, and 89% found employment related to that graduate program that they were working towards. And so our graduates are leaving prepared and in demand. So why are some of the other kinds of reasons you might choose CSU? The strong outcomes that we have are really a result of the environment that we are intentionally creating for our graduate students. We have an engaged graduate community that supports collaboration, innovation, and both personal and professional growth. You can learn from expert faculty who are not only leaders in their fields, but also deeply committed to mentoring the next generation, which again, it's just so exciting working with grad students who are soon going to be leaders in their fields. We also invest a lot in professional development opportunities to prepare students for success just beyond their content areas or just beyond the degree. What do they really need for the workforce? And throughout it all, you can continue to build that lifelong connection to the RAM family, a community that continues to support you long after graduation. So let's talk a little bit about that grad RAM community here at CSU. When we talk about an engaged graduate community, it's more than just words, it's literally physically built into everything we do. We created the grad space as a dedicated area where graduate students can gather, study, collaborate, take a break if they need it. Each year, we offer literally hundreds of different social and professional events and workshops, something for everyone. The grad show, which is coming up really soon, is another highlight. It's a one-day showcase of graduate student research, creativity, and entrepreneurship from across campus. And through Graduate Student Council, students have a really strong voice to advocate for their needs and build an even stronger sense of community. So as an example, we do have a lot of different interests and graduate groups around those interests. Graduate school can be challenging, it's hard, and it often requires adaptations and life changes. So connecting with other students, graduate students who understand what it's like, help people feel more supported and less isolated. So we support a lot of different kinds of graduate groups on campus that help make it easier to build connections. And all of our graduate students are welcome and invited to engage in these different kinds of groups. So in addition to the ones that are specifically listed here, there are over 475 student organizations that welcome graduate students. We also recognize the importance and power of our faculty mentors for graduate students. They're really crucial in the success of our students, and we support both our faculty mentors and our graduate student mentees through the Graduate Center for Inclusive Excellence or for inclusive mentoring. And graduate students can also be involved in mentoring each other through our peer mentoring program. So we're trying to help our faculty grow their mentoring skills through this Graduate Center for Inclusive Mentoring and the training programs that are associated with it. But we have parallel options for our graduate students as well. And we take the daily impact of this work really seriously. At the heart is a commitment to personal and professional well-being. We prioritize initiatives that foster a strong sense of belonging and community among our graduate students. We advocate for broad interdisciplinary engagement and other professional development opportunities that extend beyond that discipline-specific training that you get in your degree program. Key themes include essential skills like writing, communication, networking, career pathways, leadership, negotiation for jobs that provide our students with a competitive edge. And we're always working towards additional and innovative professional development support. Our most recent initiative includes our engagement in these 2 career training platforms that are specially targeted to graduate students. So why return to CSU? As you know, there's already a really strong alumni network and institutional pride. We have all these different kinds of flexible programs for you. We have cutting edge research and discovery. We have a history and a mission and intention around outreach and engagement and a commitment to service. So at CSU, your journey as a RAM doesn't have to end with that first degree. It continues to grow. Graduate students at CSU are really at the heart of our mission of access and student success for undergraduates and research innovation. By returning to CSU, you can be involved in all of these pieces that really defines what it means to be a RAM. If you want to learn more about graduate education in our current student body, we're going to have a panel in just a moment, but I also encourage you to visit our collection of stories on graduate student impacts. So as part of our commitment to access, CSU supports options for students to apply to graduate school for free. So I want to personally invite all of our alumni to apply to graduate school degree programs, our master's and doctoral programs, for free. Application fees are automatically waived if you have received your degree from CSU or other regionally accredited Colorado institutions or a U.S. land grant institution. So with that, I'm going to end, and thank you for your attention, and I'm excited to move on to our panel.
Okay, thank you to everybody who has submitted questions online. I have a whole list of them, so don't worry, we'll get to as many of those as we can. I'm going to go ahead and welcome up our panelists. Although you can't see yourselves, you'll be centered, so please try not to move the chairs. But I will be keeping up with you. Excited to introduce our panelist here. So the first person we have, we'll have you sit according to like your order here. Awesome. Okay, so Courtney Castleberry right here. She is a master's of education in education and human resource studies and organizational learning. She's a current student. When are you anticipated to graduate? No? Spring of 27. Next to her, we have Jonathan Cable, Masters of Agriculture and Agricultural Sciences and Teacher Development. He is when did you graduate? 2020, recently, right? May. So yes. So, and then Susan, a Master's of Science in Student Affairs and Higher Education. So lots of different programs on here. Susan, when did you graduate? 2023. And, but all of these students up here have experience both as alums of CSU for these ones, sorry, Courtney, soon to be, and all sorts of really fun experiences that I'm excited for you all to ask questions on. We have a few questions that are, that I'll have you start off with, and then we can kind of alternate with some of our online ones. Perfect. Okay. And also if you could repeat the question, mostly for our in-person folks, but if you could wait to talk into the microphone, that is how our online folks are going to hear from you. So first of all, we'll start off with introducing yourself, share what you are or were studying, and then why you decided to pursue a graduate education with CSU.
Hi, I am Courtney. I am a current employee at CSU full-time and a part-time online graduate student. And I've already forgotten what I'm supposed to say. Wonderful. Okay. So like Sophie had said, I'm pursuing the master's in education for human resource studies, and it's the OLPC program. So organizational learning, performance, and change. It's quite a lengthy title. And the reason why I've chosen to pursue this degree is that CSU offers current employees a great benefit called the Employee Study Privilege Program, where we are able to take a certain number of credits for free. And so, with the help of the Graduate Studies Office as well as the School of Education, I've been able to map out pursuing this degree completely free, hopefully, which will be an ideal way to achieve that for me. And the reason why I chose this program is because I actually took a course in the MBA program in the College of Business because I am curious about how people learn. I'm curious about how that works in the workplace and sort of what we can do with those two areas together. And I took an intro to business course, and I immediately knew that was not for me, which is a great thing to learn as well. I think it's helpful to know what I didn't want to pursue. And so the things that I took away from that class were that I was still really curious about the people aspects of that and about how to support people in the workplace in various different ways. And so I kind of shopped around to see different opportunities and sort of where those things might fall. And this ended up just being the right fit for me with it being online and asynchronous. It works super well for me with being a full-time employee where then I can complete my work when it works for me and I don't feel behind or rushed or anything like that.
Awesome. Yeah. Hey, y'all. So my name is Jonathan Cable. So I did my master's in agricultural education, and it was actually really closely right behind the tails of my undergrad experience at CSU. And so I got an undergrad in landscape architecture and construction management. And then right away that summer applied for a master's for ag ed. And really what kind of pushed me into that first was honestly just some really great experiences in my undergrad experience, being an ag ambassador and being then able to tie that into leadership experiences and just have a great institutional knowledge of CSU. So that led me to then applying and actually being offered a full assistantship with the Dean's Office for the College of Ag. And so they covered all of my tuition and also gave me a stipend for my time as a grad student. And so, but really underlying all of that was just a deep passion for agriculture and for rural communities in Colorado and understanding how do we best support rural communities and ag producers in the state. And so the best option for that was really to pursue an ag ed degree to understand, how do we both educate the community that we serve, but also how do we make sure that their voices are heard in everything that we do as a land-grant university institution. So, yeah.
Hello, everybody. I'm Susan Brown. I use she, her pronouns. I studied student affairs in higher education online through CSU. And much like Courtney, I was already an employee at CSU, so I was utilizing the employee study privilege. I knew I wanted something more for professional development and didn't know quite what that was, and was talking to a few mentors and my supervisor, and it was suggested that I check out what certificates were available for me to take through CSU online. So I started out with a higher education administration certificate, really enjoyed the classes that I was taking and was encouraged by instructors in those courses to apply for the full program, and that's how I did that, and then continued to take courses while working full-time for the College of Ag at CSU, and actually got to work with Jonathan when he was a student as well. So I think the reason why I did pursue that at CSU, beyond it being a really wonderful program for current employees, is that I felt really supported in the program. I knew that even though I was technically a distance learner, I would have support from on and off campus resources from instructors in the program. I knew that people were in my corner and wanted to help me succeed, especially, and that was really important to me, especially as someone who is working really long weeks and also needed to complete coursework.
Could you tell us about something that was very different from your undergraduate experience to your graduate experience?
So the question was, could we tell something that was very different from our undergraduate experience in our graduate experience? I think for me, being fully online was a learning curve. I think that not going to lectures in person or lectures or classes that were synchronous was a big change for me. I had to be more self-starting than I was in undergrad. You don't have a specific time where you are going to lecture and sitting down and looking at this material. And oftentimes I had to schedule that as if I was scheduling appointments or work things. So that was definitely a learning curve for doing online education. But I think in the end, it was really helpful. And to know that other people in the online program were also doing the same thing. It was a little difficult sometimes to coordinate with someone who was working in Germany or Saudi Arabia and doing a group project, but it always worked out in the end. And I think it worked out for the better to have that experience and have the flexibility and the connectedness across even outside of the US to come together and share our experiences to create really well-rounded outcomes.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think that self-starting piece is definitely a big first hurdle that you have to learn in grad school. I think for myself, one of the major changes was really just that sense of ownership that you can have over what you're learning. I think as an undergrad, you're kind of expected to learn the content, pass the exam. For landscape architecture, just get to your presentation day. And I think for grad school, it's really that idea that you can own what you're learning and really be passionate about that. And also, I think there's that sense of pride that you feel when you feel like you can start to add to the conversation, whether that's through your research findings or whether that's through just the conversations that you have with your professors and faculty, that you really say, oh, okay, I can actually own this space. For myself, it was understanding what are the values of rural communities, and being able to feel like you're contributing to that space is, I think, a pretty different experience than most undergrads feel. And it's not just about, just getting the comprehension necessarily. It's about what you can add to the conversation.
Yeah, I love that. I feel like I have had very similar experiences to Susan, maybe. I also had to really navigate and learn how to do a fully online program. The undergraduate experience I had was on a small private liberal arts college, and it was pretty hands-on. My professors were pretty involved in helping me plan out my courses and pretty involved with, do you need an internship? Do you need to make sure that you take this class this semester instead of this semester to make sure that you are still graduating on time? Like, there was some pretty heavy involvement and conversation around that with each of us in the programs. And I really just had to learn that that is different at other places. And it's been an awesome experience for me to know that I am responsible for my learning and I am responsible for making sure that I get registered for my classes on time and I make sure that my financial aid is taken care of, whatever that piece is. It's really been a cool experience to remind myself too that like I can do these things and I can do hard things and all of that. But yeah, it's been a great transition to learn this way. And I still feel like people are just as engaged online as they did during my undergraduate experience in person. It's just different way of learning, and cool to still do group projects, especially as adults, and to also learn that we can work together at all ages. So that's been fun too, to see people across generations doing this all together online has been really fun.
We have a question from online. If you are comfortable, could you share a little bit about what you wrote in your personal statement?
Well, I was actually thinking about this. So, Colleen, whenever you're talking about writing your personal statement, for myself, it was actually really challenging because when I was writing it, I didn't really know. I'm like, okay, ag education, I guess that fits with what I'm doing, except I don't have like any experience in ag education itself. And so really focusing on, again, what do I bring to the conversation? What do I bring to the table? Because everybody has something unique. And so being able to write about, my passion for rural communities and kind of the experiences that I've had at CSU to support rural communities thus far, I think that was that first step where I'm like, oh, okay, I actually can maybe do this and have this grad experience. And so being able to write about that and also be authentic about it and not say like, hey, I'm trying to like sell you on myself, but just like, this is who I am. I hope that this is what y'all are looking for. But yeah, I think just starting out and saying like, hey, this is what I'm bringing to the table, and knowing that that's going to be unique because that's your story.
So I have to think back to 2020 because that's when I would have written my personal statement. But I had a unique experience where I was already working in higher education when applying. So I was really interested in being able to directly apply what I was going to be learning in the Student Affairs and Higher Education program to my work, which really is how that program worked out for me. It was pretty incredible. I would learn something in a class, a situation would come up in the College of Ag, in our team, with this team of students that I was working with that we had talked about in class, and I would be able to directly apply what I was learning. But that was really what I was looking for with the opportunity to pursue graduate studies with the Student Affairs and Higher Education program. So I really talked about that and how my personal belief or philosophy on supervising students and working with students, and how I wanted to grow in my knowledge of why I think the way I do as far as my philosophy. And I really think that was something that the program did deliver on for me, was being able to have the conceptual framework behind what I do and why I do it. And so I think really just applying that to that personal statement, I was in a pretty unique situation to be able to directly apply it to what I was doing and what I was contributing to CSU as an employee.
Could you tell me a little bit about something that was really pivotal in your graduate experience?
I think for myself, oh yeah, thank you. So something that was pivotal in my grad experience was being able to take some additional courses that I don't think necessarily fit within like an ag education context. And so some of those courses were with the Center for Public Deliberation at CSU, which really focuses on how do we have civilized dialogue and deliberative conversations about tough issues. And being able to explore that, I think for myself, had me thinking about how do I become a lifelong learner. It's not just about getting through the required courses. It's not just about, okay, this ticks off every single box that is needed for my degree, but really starting to think through how do I pursue that lifelong learning process to become excited about what I can continue to learn and give back to communities. And so I was actually able to learn with them over 3 semesters during my experience in grad school. And that was pretty pivotal, not just for me as a student, but also professionally, to think about what's next after grad school.
Yes, something that has been pivotal for me in my grad school experience is just the power of asking questions. I feel like I love to hear people's thoughts and opinions about things, and the way that my professional grad experience has been is there has been so much space for dialogue and sharing articles, sharing perspectives on things. And I feel like with the program I'm in, that has truly been pivotal for me to take what I'm learning and I'm reading in my course and then apply it to examples and experiences that are happening real time. I think that has truly been something that has really helped me connect to that work and connect to where I see myself using it in the future. And just in the same vein of the power of asking questions is that I was a couple credits shy of being able to graduate spring of 2027. And I had a conversation with my advisor and I said, I'm going to be 2 credits short. I'm not quite sure where this will fit in. It would be kind of a weird gap with the way the course schedules are laid out, where I would have a summer semester off, but then I would have to take one in the fall. And I'm really wondering if there's a way we could sort of navigate this together. And he said, I'm so glad you asked, Courtney. Let's figure out how we can maybe do an independent study, or we could, figure out how we can move things around so that this can be a good fit for you and you can stay on the same pace as your cohort. And so I really just can't emphasize enough the power of asking, like, what if this, or why did we do it this way, or anything like that. I feel like that has been just such a good reminder as a lifelong learner and even as an adult that we should always just be asking questions.
I think a pivotal moment for me, and this kind of goes back to something Jonathan was talking about before with being able to like really fully contribute to conversations in the field, was when I started to just really be able to contribute to conversations about student affairs in higher education. And when my colleagues, the assistant deans for the College of Ag, started asking, well, is there anything you've learned in your classes that could apply to what we're doing? And I think just kind of getting over that imposter syndrome that can be so real, and realizing that you do have the knowledge and you do have the experience to be able to contribute in a meaningful way. So I think that was about halfway, 3/4 of the way through my degree where I started feeling like I really do have the knowledge and experience to be able to contribute in a meaningful way. And it's being recognized by my colleagues and by my peers that this is something that I bring to the table professionally. And I think that just continued to grow through my defense as well, and being able to really fully talk through what I was presenting on and answer questions on that. I think that just brought that confidence, and it just reminds me that I do know what I'm talking about, and that I went through this degree, and there is purpose to that.
All right, I need to look at the exact wording for this one. Okay, a question specifically for Susan, but if any of you want to chime in, you can as well. Susan, how did you build community as a learner from far away? I'm applying to programs but don't live in the US, and it really scares me to apply to CSU. Was it hard working with other students who weren't in Mountain Time?
Yeah. So I think while it was a challenge, it wasn't impossible to work with folks who weren't in Mountain Time. And I think it added just some really great opportunities for all of us. I think that honestly, I was in a lot of the groups that I was in my classes, I was the only one in Mountain Time. So if that helps kind of help you think through that concern. And I think that building community remotely is something that I was also a little worried about. I was an undergrad at CSU. I was in the honors program at CSU. So I had a lot of really great community building aspects to my undergraduate community, even though I was at a large research institution. And so that was something that I was definitely thinking about. I was, thinking I might feel alone or like I didn't have community in my classes, but because of the way that online classes are structured, at least in the SAHI program, I was really able to connect with students and create group chats and Google Docs that we were sharing to talk through different situations and different class scenarios. So it is definitely very online, but through Zoom, Microsoft Teams, all of the magic that I think, and also we were kind of learning it for work at the time that I was starting my grad program in 2022. So, I think through the magic of the internet and the power of connection through those avenues, I was able to connect with folks when they came into town to graduate, which was really fun as well, because I was able to give some Fort Collins recommendations since I live here and am part of this community. So it was really fun to get to see folks come in who had never been to Fort Collins or never been on CSU's campus, but were, fully my classmates through this whole process. And so, yeah, I think you definitely do have to put the effort in to make those connections and make it more than just being in the same classes and responding to discussion posts. But if there's someone who you're really agreeing with in a lot of the discussions and you're like, I just want to get to know this person, like set up a time to talk. They probably also want to talk with you. So it does take some time and some effort, but it definitely is something that I value from the online education I had.
To add on to that, would you have anything to share with students that are here on campus about finding community and belonging?
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. So finding community and belonging on campus, I think for myself was a little different, especially being one of the only ag ed students on campus during my time. So I think I found a lot of community, honestly, just like in my work, just because I was able to, obviously be in the office in the College of Ag every single day. And so I think finding community looks different for each grad student, whether that's in their lab, whether that's out in the field, whether that's in the classroom, if they have more traditional classes together. And so I think for myself, really, it is just, starting to form those relationships wherever you are on campus. Don't assume that you have to go to a certain group of people just because they are grad students, but start expanding those networks wherever you are. And two, I think it's really cool to have those similar lived experiences with other grad students that you can connect with across campus, just in the work that you do. So for myself, whether that was at recruitment events or whether that was, College of Ag, poster sessions or things like that, getting to connect with other grad students who have similar lived experiences, but then also can contribute to just that overall sense of community on campus. So.
Have any of you participated in research? And if so, can you explain at a very basic level what you did?
Yeah, so I did the research that we did was focusing on stakeholder values for ag education across the state of Colorado, understanding how do values shape the learner experiences for students in high school ag education programs. So things like Future Farmers of America, 4-H. And so really it was a lot of surveys that we sent out and then did, some qualitative analysis back here on campus. And I think something that was really awesome was being able to have those connections just through everyday experiences when, traveling across the state for my work with the dean's office. So it didn't really feel like a ton of cold calls to folks. It felt like, hey, I'm just working in this community already. Now I get to survey the folks that I work with. And so that's like a very, very basic level. But I think the implications and the application of that research was then helping kind of form a framework around how do we engage values of stakeholders across the state. So whether they are teachers, whether they are parents, whether they're the students themselves, understanding the value that they see in agricultural education, and then thinking through how do we bring those values to light in the work that we do on campus, whether that be through our recruitment efforts, whether that be through our in-classroom sense of belonging and community building that we have in the College of Ag, or whether that's even thinking through, how are we allowing students to have a successful pathway back to their communities and the values that their communities have whenever they're waiting for them to come back with their skills that they've acquired at CSU. And so it was a really, really in-depth 2-year process of, forming those surveys, thinking through how do we make them accessible for everybody, and then how do we kind of make sure that it's also going to be pragmatic in a sense as well. And so I think that was one of the coolest pieces of the research, was thinking through, hey, this has real world implications at CSU and across the state. We were working with Colorado Team Ag Ed for that project. And so understanding that it had real world implications, it wasn't just going to be, a thesis that I wrote and then sat on a shelf, but really it was going to be used, in the next iteration of strategic planning, and also the work that the College of Ag is doing now. So.
I think we're getting a lot of questions for just general advice that you would give to either a current graduate student or someone who wants to be pursuing a graduate education very soon. And that was also one of the questions that we had. So that is perfect. But one piece of advice that you would give.
Okay, my piece of advice would be to really think about what type of rigor you're looking for with your graduate degree. I think we learned in the presentation earlier that there are different lanes and avenues for how to pursue graduate education. And I think that is a piece that I would definitely recommend to consider when you're going to pursue higher ed.
Yeah, I think something that you shared earlier is just asking questions. I think there's a lot of assumptions that you can make as a grad student that you're just doing things the right way or maybe the not right way. And so I think just being able to ask those questions, even though you might feel like you're like, hey, I feel like I maybe should know this already. And so just having that humility to like go into your advisor and say, hey, I actually have no idea what I'm doing right now. Can you help me with this? And so having that humility just to ask questions and to just to be curious about the process, because the process I think looks different for so many people, whether that's being online or in person. And so just taking the time to ask those questions and not just assume that things are going to happen like they do in undergrad, where you're kind of told what to do and what steps to take every single semester. Just curiosity.
Yeah, I think those are both top pieces of advice. I think something I'll add is to dive in, whether you're on campus or off campus, you get out of this what you put into it, and people are going to meet you. They're going to meet you where you're at, but you also need to meet other people where they're at. So kind of having that balance of challenging yourself, finding support, and diving into what you're passionate about. I think Courtney said it earlier, but it's just as important to figure out what you don't like as it is to figure out what you do like. And hopefully you have some sense of that from undergraduate studies or professional work, but just continuing to figure that out, I think, is really important. Get nerdy about what you're studying, because that's why you're there.
One last question for you all. Could you tell us a little bit about your strategies for balancing work and family and research and scholarship responsibilities? How do you manage to do it all?
Okay, strategies for balancing work, school, life, everything that comes with being a grad student. And I think that was definitely a hurdle for me. Working a full-time job with CSU that, as Jonathan also knows from his work with the College of Ag, is sometimes a lot more than 40 hours in a week. Jonathan and I had the opportunity a few times to go to the National FFA convention, if any of you are familiar with FFA, with 70,000 high school students studying agriculture, but 16 hours in a van across the country and still having to get to a hotel room and do homework can really put a strain on that balance. But I think scheduling was my best friend. I think that until I figured out that I needed to set that time aside for myself, I wasn't going to do it that way. And then reminding myself that if I don't listen to the lectures on Monday, like I said I was going to, I'm not going to have the time on a Saturday or Sunday to spend time with friends or family, or do a deep clean of my house, or whatever that might be. And so really just having that self-discipline, which is definitely something that I had to grow in as I was pursuing my degree. So I think that balance looks different for everybody, and finding what works for you is important. And also remembering that you are a full person while you're in school. So making time, because it's not going to be easy to find time. So making time for yourself and for things that bring you joy outside of your education can be really important.
Yeah, I think for myself, I think one of the biggest strategies, or more just like the mindset of how I approached learning, was being okay to learn in chunks. I'm definitely the person that likes to do a full project all in one sitting. And so being able to say, oh, okay, I'm going to watch that lecture, and then, this evening, maybe I'll write a reflection, and then I'll, just like breaking it up in chunks, so that you don't feel like you have to do, a whole week's worth of assignments in one sitting, or, in an afternoon. Because there were times when I did make that mistake. And those Saturdays and Sunday nights were not fun. And so being willing to just, break it up in chunks and learn as you go.
I'm just going to repeat the same thing that Susan and Jonathan already said, but just in different words. I call it just embracing the flexibility of it. I think for me, being an asynchronous distance online learner, that almost felt like there was too much freedom at the beginning, where then I was having those Sunday night cram sessions of watching the lecture, doing the work, and then maybe a quick 5-minute check to say, okay, what do I have to do for next week, right? Instead of giving myself that space and that time throughout the week to really digest what I was learning and what I was experiencing. So that has been something that has been good for me, is to just sort of embrace those chunks of learning, like Jonathan had said. And that I do think, from what I'm hearing, being in this space with other grad students, Susan and Jonathan, is that's what grad students are doing, is that in order to be a full person and to have other parts of your life present as well, that to feel that comfortability to do that. And so, yeah.
Okay. Thank you all for joining us. Let me put this back over to running back and forth from doing all the things. Thank you all for joining us, and thank you to our panelists. Thanks to all of you who are joining online. I know I'm not representing the graduate school myself, but I can say here, if you're worried about distance learning, you did a great job tonight. So great job. And on here we have Dr. Webb's information if you want to connect with her or the graduate school. You can always also contact the Alumni Association at any point, and we're happy to connect you. And if you want to ask more questions to these panelists, let me know, and I can always see how to best facilitate that connection. But thank you all. Have a great night, and go Rams.